dear colleagues, I'm pleased to introduce Apostolis Papakostas and his book, which was translated into Russian, about corruption and trust. So we will be very grateful for your presentation and for your interesting talk. You will have about 40 or 50 minutes, and then the question and answer session will follow.
Yeah.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to come here and talk about my book. My talk now will be focused on the comparative part of the book, as I understand it. You wished to hear some more about it. But I will start with a small introduction of the book in general, and then I will go into the comparative part of it. Well, this is a book, if I use just the two words of the title, Trust and Distrust, there is a kind of industry in social sciences in the world, and especially in sociology, in the last 20 or 30 years, where the concept of trust was introduced. Any major publishers in the world have published books on trust. Nearly all known sociologists have written something about trust. Trust became something, an important concept in social sciences. Actually, in the Encyclopedia for the Social Sciences, from 68, the concept of trust is not existing there. So it is a kind of a new kind of invention, someone would say. People started to speak about special kind of societies. They call them trust societies. I didn't like the term, I would like to say, and there is one simple reason. Most of us, most of the time, distrust others in very different ways. I have asked quite many students in Sweden what kind of instructions the parents are giving to their children. Especially in girls are getting advices, be careful of strangers, be careful of men. This is a kind of problem that you find it always. And usually you see here that there's a picture of keys in the book. All of us are using keys all the time. And why we're using keys, it's quite simple. We distrust others. We just create some kind of dividing lines between the ones we trust and the others we do not trust. And usually in societies, in differentiated societies, you find both trust and distrust. And one major problem I had with existing literature on trust was that, when things appear in contrasting pairs, like continuity, change, trust, distrust, it is nearly impossible to understand the one without understanding the other. So theoretically this book is kind of such an effort. I'm trying to understand why people at certain times trust others, but with the kind of precondition that sometimes we distrust as well. So the relation between trust and distrust. And then there is another word there, corruption. People think that, well, when people are trusting each other, we shall not have corruption. Well, I've been studying corruption in Greece and Sweden, and I found out that in order to, corruption needs two, at least, two parts. You cannot be corrupted by your own. It needs some kind of exchange, two persons. And usually you find quite much of trust in relations of corruption. So sometimes trust can be transformed into corruption. Otherwise it's impossible to cheat if you don't trust. It's like love, you know. You need to trust the other in order to have some kind of love relation. So trust and corruption are the same things. They're what we call nowadays relational or figurational concepts in sociology. So this is a figurational approach to understanding social life. The book starts with quite simple questions. One question is how can a woman, working class woman called Eva Svensson, a typical Swedish name, the most typical Swedish name I would like to say, can call an enterprise 500 kilometers away and she can order clothes. And then they send the clothes to her together with a note. She picks the clothes at the post office and then she gets a note that she can pay in 30 days. You understand, how can a company 500 kilometers from Stockholm can send products without paying? And then the other question is, I start with is, well, if you go to Stockholm, how can you trust the city and walk into the city without any kind of fear that will be robbed or killed or whatever it is? After answering this type of questions, I move more into macro phenomena, and I'm trying to relate in some ways how kind of macro phenomena like state formation, state development are related to the production of trust in societies. So this is a kind of a technical thing. I start with the easy questions, with the everyday life, and trying to get the reader into more deeper and deeper theoretical problems. It works sometimes, I think. I have a criticism in major works in social sciences where people are trying to argue something like that, well, if there is trust in society, then organizations like states or civil society or business will work, because all of them need some kind of a culture of cooperation in order to function well. What I'm doing in the whole book is I'm trying to reverse the argument. The point mainly is, well, when states are working, when civil society is working, when enterprises are working well and follow the imperatives, the logical imperatives in each sphere, then people trust them. Otherwise, people do not trust them, and they should not trust them in some case. So this is the main argument I would like to say in the book, that I'm criticizing what I call here the neo-culturalist perspective, where people are trying to explain macro phenomena by referring mainly to soft aspects of social life as trust, networks. There are several norms, there are several other concepts. And I'm trying to say in some ways, well, we have taken several of those concepts from anthropology, and there is a problem that you cannot understand modern societies with archaeological, with anthropological concepts. Sometimes you need to understand how modern institutions are working. Many, I think, I don't write it explicitly in the book. I think Bourdieu has this problem, because he did, as you know, a kind of research in North Africa, in the villages of North Africa. He developed several of his concepts at this point of time, and then he comes to France, a modern country, and he's trying to understand it mainly by the anthropological concepts he developed during his stay in the North African small villages. I think that what we call the modern world, there are several social inventions, among them modern states, that we need to understand how they are operating. And then we can speak about trust and distrust. In the book, there are then one chapter studying trust or distrust, mainly by studying keys and the creation of boundaries in social life. Because there is a phenomenon that I call it the segmentation of trust. There are zones of trust and not, you don't trust society as such, but when you are in the right zone, then you trust the right people. But when people are erecting boundaries, they create a kind of asymmetrical trust. It is trust from the inside to the outside. We can trust each other when the doors are locked, because strangers are not allowed to enter. We trust strangers if they are outside. But from the other point of view, from the outside, people will start to think, well, what are the professors doing when they have meetings, when the PhD students are not there? How can we trust professors? How can we trust science when it is produced in closed laboratories? Or how can we trust field work in anthropology when a PhD student is doing field work in an isolated village somewhere in Africa and then comes back with a report or a thesis? How can we trust that this is science? So the chapter 3 then tries to solve this problem. You know, when you create trust in this way by segmenting the social space, you create the problem of transparency. So the chapter 3 then discusses the problem. How can you, when you are not there, when you are outside, how can you trust that parliaments are taking the decisions in the right way, academics are producing science in the right way, and there I developed the idea that there are some kind of mechanisms actually based on distrust. Science, democracy, many other things are based on distrust. We examine our students here. It's because we don't trust that they will read the literature by their own. I don't know how many times I have been evaluated and examined in my way to become a professor. You know, and democracy is, we don't trust the kings because we believe that they will continue in some ways. They give to the family or whatever it is. Then we have institutions, the institutions of democracy. are mainly based on distrust. Where they're working, and this is the point there, where they're working, then we can trust it. It's the same with science. If we follow some kind of academic routines, how we examine everything from PhD students to professors, then we say, well, this is science, and we can trust it. So this is the main point. And in a general sense, in this literature, it was influenced by the literature on trust. It was influenced by this kind of movement where the neoliberal movement. Well, we have individuals, and then we find they need to find ways in order to cooperate. Probably culture provides them by giving them some kind of cultural scripts, how to behave. But I thought, as I told you, that this was quite problematic, because I moved to Sweden at the age of 25. I think I have learned quite much about Swedish social life, and honestly, I can do whatever I want in Sweden and find a kind of cultural rule that legitimizes my behavior. If I take alcohol, I can be a heavy alcoholist, and it's a kind of Nordic culture. But on the other side, I can find what we call in Sweden the absolutists, the people that never consume alcohol. So I can choose whatever I want, and there are cultural scripts saying that, well, you can legitimate this kind of behavior. In this neoliberal idea, the institution of the state, is always described as a kind of destructor of trust. This is the neoliberal idea. You have people who cooperate, you know, each one promoting their own interests, and then it works in some way. When you have third parties trying to, let's say, enforce contracts, social life or the economy is not working. So the state in this kind of literature was a kind of evil, destroyer of trust. Sometimes I felt that they were influenced by the old anarchists. Probably many of you know the old book of the Russian anarchist, not Bakunin, the other, Kropotkin, and his ideas that people can cooperate, but then when you have a kind of state, they destroy the natural tendency to cooperate or something like that. So one of the major arguments here in the book, I try to show that, well, the state is not always killer of trust. And I mainly use the Swedish state as a kind of explanation. I don't say all states do it. Of course, I mean by that a kind of Weberian style bureaucracies that implement universal rules into particular cases, and they do it in a specific way. And we have lots of surveys in Sweden where when people are asked what they trust in life, they usually say that they trust the state. But this is a kind of historical kind of trust that people have in the state. So, but then when you ask this kind of question, yes, you say that the Swedish state, people are trusting it, etc., etc., then you need to explain, well, why, with what kind of mechanisms the state, such states are development, and how they can create trust. One of the major arguments is that states based on universal direct taxations, they develop special kind of instruments and capacities from where they can observe society. They have quite much information available. And they have as well the capacity to logistically implement decisions. They are working in other ways. I will start now showing you some of the devices here, and most of them are connected to taxation. And I will give the Greek case as a counterfactual illustration here. And I will start, as I also mentioned, that the book is written in a rather personal manner. In several occasions I come into the book and I explain or I try to analyze very personal experiences, because I have lived about 25 years in Greece and 25 years in Sweden, and you know, trying to compare those ones, it's personal for me to understand two kinds of societies. But I'm in the luxury situation to be a professional sociologist and write about it. And it's a way to understand that cultures as well are not that important. Well, the first picture I will show you is a tax map of Belsta from 1686. Actually, I live here, in this part of this. And this is the illustration of the Swedish state that early on, at about this time, developed a system of direct taxation. And how they did it? Yeah, you know, nowadays people are saying that the Swedes are paying taxes. Several persons from Russia have asked me before, how can we import the Swedish culture in paying taxes, or something like that? Well, my answer is this. Yeah, because the Swedish state is in some way mapped society. They know where I live, how much I own, and how much I earn. On the basis of this, in some ways, when people are discussing politics, there is always a substantial and rather uncontested description of society. Politicians in Sweden usually agree on the input of politics. They may have differences, disagreements, you know, about what kind of policies will implement it, etc., etc. But usually they agree, because the state has a very good, perfect, nearly perfect mapping, I would call it, of society. I will show you another picture. You don't see it that much here, probably not. I'll see if I have a better one here. No. I don't know how much you see. But this is actually the village from where I come from in Greece. I tried to find such a topographical map, but we don't have it. Not a unified system of, you know, ways. It was topographers who did it in Sweden. But in Greece, we do not have it. And actually, we do not know much about society, at least in the rational way. Nobody in Greece knows actually how many people are living in Greece. I'm registered still in my village, even if I moved from the village, I think it was 45 or 50 years ago. So for the Greek statistics, I live there. Sometimes they build schools on such assumptions. You understand the real ground for politics and planning and such things.
But when people conduct, when the state conducts a population census, it usually counts people who are actually living, whom they can access. So in fact, you are probably, I think, according to statistics, you are not living in Greece, I think.
Yeah, but many people then, even if they live in the cities, when we have the, how you call it, the annual, or the every 10 years, the registration, you know, the counting, they go there. Sometimes they have houses there, they have something. I still have a house there, but I'm not registered. And I will explain to you later on, probably when we speak about different ways of migration. Because here you have a special kind of migration in Greece where people are living in some ways partly there and partly probably in Sweden or in the States. It is the kind of chain migration and return migration and such things. But anyhow, if we're speaking about generally about Greece and Sweden, and I have here some kind of variables, some kind of descriptions about the state and the political system. There is a special thing in if we're speaking about the relation between state and politics. In Greece, we have a strange situation where the politics and the state are interlocked in some ways. You cannot understand where the state starts and where the politics starts. Everything is politics. And actually, in some way, there is the primacy of politics. All Greeks discussing things all the time in political terms. In Scandinavia, it's about the opposite. Many things that people in the Mediterranean world, not only in Greece, but even in Italy as well, Spain to some degree, were surprised when we come to Scandinavia because things we believe are political. The Scandinavians would say, no, this is an administrative question. It is not a political question. So in Scandinavia, the situation is more differentiated. There is a more balanced situation where people in some ways keep politics and the state apart. There is a problem or a theme in the comparative sociology of the state, discussing how can you create, in some ways, an insulated state, one that it can operate according to universal rules of a barrier state. Sometimes you can do it by institutional device, having laws, or sometimes institutions saying that, well, state officials will not stay at the same place for long periods of time, they have to move. the idea is there that they will not develop connections with social connections with the local people in order to be able to implement state decisions. In Greece we have too much of such institutions. They do not work, never work. In Scandinavia there is a strange problem that actually there are not many institutions. People in Bergsta, Vallentuna, and the north part of Stockholm where I live, they work in the local community. The problem is that they're not corrupted. I don't know them. I'll go into it how this was created, this kind of insulation. Usually the easiest way to create it is by recruiting state officials from different social groups. In Sweden, historically, this was done by recruiting state officials from the aristocracy at the beginning. And this creates a kind, a social distinction becomes an organizational distinction at the state level. Then, if we are speaking about nation states, there are modes of inclusion, usually of the lower social strata, into the national politics. What we have seen historically in Greece, and still this way, is that the incorporation of the lower classes into the national politics went through a kind of political networks and not through autonomous horizontal association, as in Scandinavia the labor movement was. The labor movement organized the workers, and then they were integrated into the national politics as an autonomous group. In the Greek case, we had the integration by kind of social networks. Then, there are different ways to describe the city or the state-citizen relation. In this case, when you have a state under such circumstances, quite often you find a strange thing in the state that at certain points of time you go to a state authority and what you meet is the bureaucratic indifference. I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of going somewhere and the people who are working there not being polite and sending you from the one office to the other, and you come the one day and then come the next day and come the next day. But if you manage to find a kind of key, let's say that you have somebody then you can do impossible things that you cannot do in Swedish state. You cannot find, it's difficult, unusual that you can do things, let's say getting a driving license or getting a permission to build a house or something like that because you have connection. It works sometimes, but it's quite unusual. But in the Swedish state, you find something strange. They're always polite when you meet them, very, very, very friendly. But at the same time, when they implement rules, they say, well, this is the rule, sorry. So you see the kind of opposing things. I'll try now here the rest of the time to explain why those things developed this way. And I will use, for the ones who know concepts from historical sociology, I'll use the idea of historical sequencing, when things are coming in different orders, that you get different outcomes. And I'll just show you here. Well, if we start with Sweden here, we have a very rather unusual sequence, at least for many states in Europe, where the formation of the state predated modern democratic institutions. You remember that I showed you the maps, the modern state, the expression taxation from the 16th, 17th centuries, and then Sweden became politically modern very late, actually, the beginning of, after the Russian Revolution, actually. And mainly, in some way, as a consequence of the Russian Revolution. So we had as well the unification of the laws and the juridical system, the incorporation of the church under the state, and the homogenization of the population. Those things were done before the, the big revolutions in Europe, the cultural in France, and the industrial in England, could affect the outcome of the development. You see here that I use Barrington Moore and the Norwegian sociologist Stein Rocken, and even in some way another American political sociologist, Lipset. They have written quite much about it. We have in Sweden a system of taxation that developed very early on, and one of the devices they used was that mapping out. This was a very simple map I showed, but they were more sophisticated. They did it very systematically. So Sweden, from the 16th, 17th century, it is mapped. The state can observe it. And politics can then discuss about the content of politics by having a kind of rational description about nowadays the incomes of people. So one of the reasons that I pay taxes in Sweden is that I cannot do anything else. All my incomes are observed. All money are traced. So it's anyhow. Another peculiarity in Sweden is the early mass education. The 19th century, nearly all Swedes, about 150 years ago, could write and read. It's a very important thing because, bureaucracies are modern, relatively modern device. In order to understand how they operate, you need to be able to make an experiment of thought, saying that, well, if the universal rule looks like this, and my case is this, then you must predict the outcome of bureaucratic treatment. If you cannot make this prediction because the bureaucracy is not working, or because you are not able to reason this, to make this kind of experiment of thought, then you don't trust bureaucracy because of ignorance, or you don't trust bureaucracy because bureaucracy is not working. If you cannot predict the outcomes of bureaucracy by making experiments of thought, then it doesn't work well. what happened as well here was that the state developed direct contacts with between the state and the subjects at this point of time. So in Sweden we have some people are saying about Swedes that they're state people. There is always direct contact between the state and the people. I will show you another version of it, the Greek case, but it is not. If we go into Greece, in Greece we have a kind of the opposite historical sequence of development. Early political reforms. After the French Revolution, the Greek state was established, and quite quickly the political institutions were institutionalized. Elections, parliaments, parliamentarism. Greece is nearly the first country in Europe that institutionalized as a new nation. You know, as a new nation, they wanted to implement the newest things, politically at least at this point of time. Another thing that we have it from the beginning is that the state and the economy were connected from this time, and actually the economy developed as a consequence of the state. In Sweden, actually, from the 1850, it was connected in Sweden as well, but for different historical reasons, from 1850, 60, 70, the economy got apart from the state and became what we nowadays know as the Swedish capitalism, the successful Swedish enterprise. Quite many of them were established between 1870 to 1920 and became successful. For many reasons, the Greek state did not establish a system of taxation, mainly because there were available money in the European market. The Greek Revolution actually was done by foreign money, Russian money as well, at this point of time. So the Greek state, you know, we were speaking about the problems Greece has nowadays. They started there actually, from the revolution. They're never paid back, and they're renewed all the time with more loans and more loans and more loans. At the time when they established modern democracy, the knowledge of establishing mass organizations was not existing. Mass organizations are a product from in Europe at least from 1890, you know, the German Social Democrats and the Labour parties and such things. So but you know, the elites, they needed the votes of the people in order to become re-elected. So they started to integrate in many different ways people by personal connections, by using in some way lots of pre-modern institutions, networks or whatever you call it. So they were integrated at this time by this kind of networks. The citizenship, you know, when you have the citizenship that is based in taxation, as in the Swedish case, you have another type of citizenship. Because when the state comes and puts the state hand into your pocket, then you start to say, well, what are you doing with my money? What do I get back? In such occasions, several institutions that in some way control the power are developed. And then you give taxes, you get back social rights. Think now about societies that are not based, or states not based on taxation. And in the Greek case, because they established the modern political institutions, citizenship became a formal right. And mainly the state has a kind of, it's extreme formalistic. You have this right, you have this right, you have this law and this law and this law. Sometimes I've been appointed on several occasions now as an evaluator of the Greek university system, and I get a 3-page document according to the law, this one, the law there, the law, the second, the third, the fifth, or something like. The Minister of Education appoints Professor Papakostas as evaluator or something like that. In Sweden, we don't know about such things. It's more substantial kind of rationality, I would like to say. You do the right things, while in Greece you have to do the things the right way. This is the formalistic idea. And the whole history is that, as I told you before, when states are based on taxation, they must go into the state, register, create maps, get lots of information. This enables for states to develop what we call in comparative sociology infrastructural capacity of the states. Michael Mann, if you know his name, British American sociologist, has written quite much about it. Which means that the Greek state never managed actually to logistically implement any kind of decisions. And what we have is that in general we have a weak differentiation. If we use concepts from the modernization theory or something like that, then as societies become more and more modern, we have the process of differentiation of different spheres. The economy becomes a sphere that works according to its own contact or according to its own codes and rules. The state, the same thing. The politics, the same thing. The professions is another thing. Academy is another thing. When they go apart, they work better because they just operate according to their own logic. In Greece, we never got this thing. All spheres are interconnected, which means that they do not operate according to life. And nearly the whole life, the Greek society is a society with dense, as all Mediterranean, dense social networks. There is this discussion nowadays that networks are important for doing things. Yes, you can do things with networks, certainly. But I believe that they're good for the social life in general, that we have friends and we can meet each other and such things, but they should be kept away from public life. And I think that this is what we had in Sweden. We had a society that got modernized, and people got modernized and atomized. In Swedish cities, you don't know who is your neighbor. I live in my neighborhood there for I don't know how many years, 15, 20 nowadays. I probably know 5 or 6 persons there. Life is... but I was in Athens last week or 10 days ago. and in my old neighborhood, everybody knows about me. They invite me to their houses, you know, I get my coffee paid. Well, if I worked in Greece, they would ask me about a favor as well. So you see probably why I'm quite critical about the ideas about, especially when the elites should develop networks and they govern states and politics, whatever it is, using networks. Yeah, of course, they learn to know each other, but I have difficulties in trusting them because there are other kinds of arguments and motives than rational that in some way are used. Do we have more time?
No, we have about 40 minutes.
40 minutes?
35.
Yeah, okay, then I can...
For questions, I mean for questions. That means that you have maybe 10 minutes for presentation
Yeah.
for the rest of it.
Yeah, okay, this is summarizing some kind of argument about Sweden. I would say that it is a mapped society in any aspect someone could think about. I started with the maps, I use it metaphorically here, but it is a mapped society because there is that much information, and especially what is more relevant, the information about the economy, money and living places and transactions. Fortunes are registered, incomes are registered, then of course you must pay taxes according to this. When you map such society in this way, sometimes you simplify society and you can describe society by using actually lots of statistics. Society becomes simpler because you have accurate descriptions of it. Yeah, and of course with maps and this is from another kind of presentation. You have some kind of, if I compare the Mediterranean world and the Scandinavian, you know, I don't know if you met Greeks or South European people who are shouting at each other, while the Scandinavians are rather calm people, not speaking, you know, loudly as we Mediterraneans do. What I believe is that by this kind of mapping, as I showed, just by creating topographic map, the state developed another kind of capacity to mediate conflicts between neighbors. If I have a piece of land in Greece and I disagree with my neighbor about where our boundary is, you know, we start to shout to each other. Sometimes we have shootings, people killing each other. We have lots of processes where half of the village is with one family and half of the village is from with the other family. Sometimes, as it was in the civil war, people from each side could kill each other. Of course, they used some kind of ideological motives, but they had this kind of social disagreements that could never be solved. So we're trained in some ways because of the state was absent in our lives. So all the time we had to quarrel with each other, especially about boundaries and about other disputes as well. But in Sweden, if I have a kind of disagreement with my neighbor, then I call the local authority, and the topographer comes there and says, you know, with the map and the modern nowadays instruments, and says, no, according to the map, here is the boundary. So the conflict is solved by the kind of the state capacity. So the state here comes and mediates between neighbors, between people, solves this kind of problems, and I believe seriously that this is the historical reason why Scandinavians are this kind of quiet, polite, and if we can call them civilized people.
May I ask a question?
I'll stay here, and then you may ask me questions. And
I think you are dealing with extremely significant issue also from the point of view of Russia and sociology in general, this informal or cultural explanations on the other hand, and then institutional explanations on the other hand. And in Russian case, we definitely have two traditions. The other tradition is saying that Russia is not performing very well because it has weak institutions. The other explanation is that because of the in-official networks, Russia is not working too well. So is this, is there some kind of do you see that there is some kind of a complementarity in these terms, that if you don't have formal rules, then you have to depend on informal networks. And now, in your basic argumentation, you are saying that the informal networks were the first to make some history, and then the state came in.
the state is a modern institution,
Yeah,
at least.
the state is a modern institution which started to create formal rules for that. But how is it in?
Not only that. One of the points by showing the maps is that when the state, by the institution of established the taxation systems, it had to go there and develop several other devices that then were used. The state modernized, enacted its environment in some ways in order to function well.
My question concerns the relevance of these informal networks in explaining cases like Russia or Greece, to what extent they are relevant there. If it's not something that you can say that there are two kinds of societies, the other societies are according to, they are ruled by the rules, by the formal rules of the game, formal institutions, and the other societies are ruled by informal rules, but it's always some kind of a combination.
Yeah.
And the combination, but your point now is that the formal institutions create trust.
Yeah.
But they create another kind of trust, which is not this pre-modern form of trust, which is...
It's a modern kind of trust, yeah.
Which is a modern kind of trust. Another cultural explanation might be, for example, to say that both of these countries, which have strong other kinds of role of networks, is that they are Orthodox countries. They are, for example, this is Huntington's explanation for Greece, for example. They don't pay their debts because they are Orthodox. They are unreliable. They should not have been taken into the European Union because they are Orthodox.
Yeah, I don't think that this is a kind of argument that I would, from my point of view, that I would say that Orthodoxy has played a kind of important role, at least in modern Greece. Most of the priests were uneducated up to 1950. Probably someone would say that where the church has been involved in the taxation system, that the church is organized in different ways. My colleague Bo Rothstein, the University of Gothenburg, is coming up now with a kind of explanation that some of the churches in the northern part of Europe were locally organized as a kind of associations, and they learned, and the people paid, while in Orthodoxy you don't have to pay to the church fee, a membership fee or something like that. You are a Christian. While churches that were organized as associations where you pay a fee, and the administration of such fees in such societies develop states that are a bit different. But this is not a culturalist argument. It's that the concrete organization of the state, and there are, in some cases, even in the Muslim world, in some cases it has been organized like that, then it works in a different way. So I would not make a kind of cultural argument this way. But it is not only the culture of the networks. That was one part of my explanation. The other part is the conditions for structural differentiation of the spheres of life. This could be, and I borrowed this picture from a known Swedish historian writing about the development of the Swedish state. And this is a kind of description of Sweden done by Swedes as well. Well, they say that between the realm of the state, the realm of business, and the realm of interest representation, they are functionally different. You have very few interconnections here between. This is not, this is modernization theory I'm using, and this part of this time. Then someone can say, well, if this is embedded in a sea of social relations, will it work? It could be an issue. For all kinds of organizations to develop, they need to, to develop some kind of boundaries against network sabotage or the particularities of social life. So this is the one point. And several societies, not many, there are not many such societies in the world that can show this kind of difference. I don't have a picture of Greece here, I think, this way, but the Greek picture would be that the spheres here are more interconnected, and I don't think that this has anything with Orthodoxy or any kind of religion to do. It's social dynamics, I would hope. I don't know if I answered the...
Yes.
Some of this is, I think, the sociological explanation I can give. Different than the one that the world is divided in cultures or whatever it is. And in some societies, for some reasons, we can see that things are going this way. In other societies, things are going this way. And then, of course, sometimes things are not... we have problem in Sweden. I didn't mention this. I have written in the book, there is a chapter about corruption in Sweden, where I reverse the argument when I discuss the actual developments in Sweden the last 30 years. The point there is that the spheres are becoming more and more interconnected, which means that we can see lots of corruption scandals in Sweden that we didn't see before. So culture cannot explain both. So for me it could be the organizational architecture of societies that can explain it. And that's why I have, in the book I call it Why is there no political corruption in Sweden? And when I did this and explained it historically, then I said, but now we have corruption, why? And we have developments, we have a fragmentation in all spheres here. We have the tops, the elites in each sphere are developing connection with the other spheres, social connections, which enables for elites to become corrupted. So I have difficulties in finding that culture in Sweden should, prohibit.
The problem with Finland is that Finland is regarded as the least corrupted country in the world, whereas we have the most networked country. So it's kind of a paradox from your point of view that the networks can be strong even if they follow the rules of the game in formal terms. So they are not mutually exclusive.
Probably I will come to Sweden, to Finland and study this as a specific case and see that can you find situation where it can work? I don't know. I'm not sure if I could answer this, but I'll have it in mind about if it is like that. But the dream situation for Finland is about 15 years. Here we're speaking about more extended periods of time, and I'm not sure about the Finnish case yet.
Okay, I think we should stop now, otherwise we won't be able to collect and answer questions. Usually we start with St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg, do you have questions? Andrei?
Yes. Hello. So you linked the origins of the difference between Sweden and Greece to its early history, that the state appeared in Greece long before modern institutions. There was centralization and so on. However, if you take, for instance, Spain, here you have a country where you have a rather early centralization, so this doesn't seem to be a sufficient explanation. So from your presentation, I'm a little bit unsure as to what was the decisive factor that explains the difference. What particular constellation of factors was helpful in explaining the difference between Greece and Sweden?
Okay, I'll take. Shall I answer? Well, I have been thinking about comparing sometimes the Spanish and the Greek case. They're similar in some ways, and it is the system of taxation. The imperial Spain, they got a lot of gold from lots of money from outside. There is a difference in states when we have states that mobilize resources from their own population and states that mobilize resources from outside. In the Greek case, we had the loans, as I mentioned. The Greeks could all the time borrow money, and then they had money from migration, actually, from the European Union, etc., etc. But Spain, in its early history, had in common with Greece that didn't have to develop the system of taxation to tax the population in Spain, because they could have their empire. So it's a different kind of state that developed there, not the same as in Sweden. You understand my answer that we have two kinds of states as ideal, typical states. The one who mobilize resources from the internal territorium, and the ones who, through different means, by colonialism is the one, or by exporting oil, as we have the Arab states, that they become what we call the rentier states, which means that the elites can build up a state apparatus without implementing institutions of taxation, direct taxation. In some way, I don't know much about Russia, but I think that there is some kind of similar situation there with the problem of taxation, and you know, there are quite many states that where the elites can make, and then develops another kind of citizenship, and that was my point. So Spain and Greece are not similar, but they have some kind of similarity, and the similarity is that the resources that come outside their own society.
Thank you. Yes, this makes sense. As for Russia, although it also centralized at about the same time as Spain, the difference is that the form of taxation was mostly in the military service of the landowners,
Yeah.
whereas the monetary income of the state was derived primarily from the fur trade, from the outskirts of the empire.
Yeah.
And the state was not so particularly concerned in its early centralizing stage with personal taxation. Yeah.
I think about Russia, the American sociologist Charles Tilly, before he died, he wrote a book chapter discussing just this kind of problem and citizenship and taxation in Russia. I think it is in a book called The New Fiscal Sociology or something like that, the title of the book, and Charles Tilly has written a chapter there.
More questions?
No questions in St. Petersburg.
Okay, now we can collect questions from Moscow.
I have two small questions. First one is about maybe political experience of Mediterranean countries. For example, all the Southern European countries had an experience of authoritarian regimes in Spain, in Greece, and in Italy, and during their history. But there have never been any authoritarian regime in Scandinavia. Maybe this experience and these authoritarian regimes, they tend to intentionally destroy trust. So maybe some roots can be in this experience of the state that destroys trust. And then the second question is about maybe some history, some historical influence in Greece. Maybe it is just an open question. Maybe there is some influence of institutions in Greece that were of Ottoman origin, or some even earlier institutions.
Yeah, very good questions. And well, I started to write about clientelism and such things, you know, political exchanges in Southern Europe, together with several colleagues from other European countries. So I'll start with the idea about, you know, the experience from the Ottoman rule. The major explanation in Greece is that one of the reasons is that we were occupied by the Ottoman Empire in 400 years, and then in 200 years we never managed to solve those kind of problems. When I go to Italy, especially in the south part of Italy, they're saying the same thing. Well, there was a Spanish king, Frederick II, I think it was, that occupied Sicily in the south part of Italy That's why the south part of Italy has this problem. This is the explanation you find in Putnam's work, why the south part of Italy is not working. So he accepts in some way that the state, they are destroyed, or the authoritarian rule destroyed, and then you cannot establish it. I mean, if you look to European history, there were quite many destroyers of trust in any kind of country. So it's difficult to say, speaking about such effects for so long periods of times. We find that some places people manage to establish trust or establish modern institutions, even if they had, all kind of Europeans have some kind of ugly past. Everywhere in
But
Europe.
not the Scandinavians.
Yes, of course they have it. They were barbarians at certain points of time. But, after some time they became more modern. So it's... and actually, if I could predict for 150 years that Sweden will develop this way, I would be a liar. Because it was an old aristocracy with established privileges, the positions in the state system, an institutionalized system of corruption in Sweden. It is after 1880, 90, when we speak about Sweden becoming less corrupted than it was before. So even a country like Sweden has a corrupted past. Heavily corrupted past, I would like to say. More institutionalized. We never had such one in Greece. Then the question of breakdowns and the authoritarian, the Greek case is different. Because the breaks were very short. There were 7 years in Greece, in 67 to 74. They do never manage in 7 years to destroy trust or something. I mean, I've heard this when I go to Poland, and they say that my friend Piotr Sztomka there, he usually says, he accepts some kind of culturalist arguments. He says, well, it is the problem because of the Russians, the Soviet. They made us a kind of homo sovieticus. And I said to him, no, Piotr, don't think this way. You must understand that you must create modern institutions. Not just, it's easy in any kind of society that has problems to say, well, it is not the Greeks, it is not the Swedes, it is not the Russians, it is the others. It is the Germans who came, it is the Spaniards who came, it is the Ottomans who came. And actually the poor Ottomans, they were not corrupted when they came to Balkan. When they came to Balkan, we corrupted them. So if there is a cultural explanation, it could be the opposite one. At the long historical. I think, I don't know if I answered your question.
But then there were also, just a little, there were also some administrative traditions from Byzantine Empire. There were some of them.
It's too much, too long periods of time to speak. I don't like to speak, like, there is the idea of long-term path dependencies. I think that this is an absurdity to speak about, such a kind of continuities, and especially when we come into the modern world. There are certain breaks, there are certain innovations. I describe several of them in the book. Literacy rates that go up, people who learn to know, we have social inventions of democracy, of parliamentary institutions that can in some way control for government and corruption and several other modern things. So in some ways I'm trying to show, I don't say that all kinds of modern life is something to have, but I'm just trying to be very specific and say this institution and this mechanism is quite okay. So I'm trying to be, you know, it's easy to say, some people would say, well, they are the Protestant countries, they are different. This is the argument, a kind of Weberian argument, you know that there is a kind of Protestant ethic, capitalism. In some ways they are similar, which the one enables to the other. But we have capitalism developed everywhere in the world where we don't have Protestants. And capitalism is working without people becoming Protestants, which means that organizations sometimes can operate in very different social sites without thinking that much about culture.
I have one short question. I like the thesis that state destroys trust, but this thesis implies that trust should exist before the state destroys it. If this is true, what are the other sources of trust besides the state?
Well, my idea is not only the state. Actually, the argument is partially the state, or one of the modern institutions. So I'm trying to find this kind of modern kind of trust, where, of course, we doubt, where especially people in science, I mean, you have to question if you don't question my work, then you're not a scientist. This kind, but how can you trust them if you have this kind of modern attitude? And my idea is that there are some kind of institutions that enable, that make it possible to transform distrust into trust.
Mm-hmm.
But if they work, they produce. And then someone could say that the more of institutions, of such institutions, I call them structured skepticism, or institutionalized skepticism. You probably remember Robert Merton's arguments about science. Actually make it about societies. That when societies have lots of such institutions, then they work in some way. If students know that they will be examined, if professors know that they will be evaluated, if, all this, several kinds of, then in some ways they civilize the behavior of the actors. You know that you have to produce books if you are a professor. So my answer is not the state only. I had the picture with the reason in Sweden where you can trust the state actually is because it is not connected to interest, to the concept of interest. It's connected to the concept of rule. You follow the rules, the bureaucratic rules, or decided politically. If you connect the state officials with the specialists of exchange, the people in the economy, it is very good that we have people that are good in exchange. It's good for the economy. But when we connect the state officials and the people from the business, then you connect rule making and rule implementing and exchange. Most of the time it ends in very, very unhappy way. As I know, at least from the kind of literature that I have been followed here, mainly in historical sociology and the historical sociology of the state, it ends up in very, very unhappy ways when you connect. It is the same thing when you connect interest, you know, political interest. Most of us are engaged in politics because we have some kind of interest. But if you connect interest and rule implementing, it becomes problematic as well. So I trust if the state officials are doing their job, if I trust the people, the specialists of exchange when they're doing exchanges, but I don't trust them to implement rules. So that would be my answer, my more modern, differentiated society.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question concerning to this constructing trust, and you are speaking about state and interest, but you are not speaking about whose interest and whose state, and how these interests are expressed and which way, and what is ruining this trust after that. You are not speaking anything about societal stratas or classes or whatever, they are disappearing from your picture. Does they matter or not?
Yeah, of course. It is in my presentation here that they disappear.
Okay.
If you read the book where I speak about the state, not connected to trust, but classes are there, and you know, when I was speaking the way that they were integrated into the national politics, etc., etc. So of course I'm a sociologist, and of course the concept of class is always there in any kind of society.
What is the critical point when states start to create distrust in this institutional setting?
What do you mean, the critical?
Critical point or critical development. What feature is the? Do you see any core reason why states start to create distrust?
I didn't point out a kind of particular reason. You say I'm trying to speak about contingencies. Some specific, you know, history matters, and sometimes it depends when you do it. Usually we have a distinction between this kind of states. The states that were established with modern political institutions, there are several such ones, several in the Balkan actually, that were established with modern political institutions. And then everything comes as a consequence of that. And the states that the Swedish case, rather extreme, the opposite way. But then there are other things as well. I don't know. Can we connect this one again, or? Yeah, I can speak about other social phenomena that are related to it. I can speak about the ways the internal urbanization or migration developed. In Sweden, for instance, we have historically from 1850 and onwards, we have a kind of career migration where people move to find a work, profession, or what. We have rather coerced migration, which means that when people left the villages and moved into the cities, they could not return back. And we have atomized individuals quite early in the Swedish social context. Actually, before industrialization. We have both proletarization and atomization in Sweden, actually before the development of modern political institutions. And of course, the interests were defined in huge social categories, working class interests, or middle class, or bourgeoisie, or whatever it is. If we take this, we have another option, and we could discuss is why as well. There is a circular migration. As I told you, I still go back to my village sometimes, and I still own something. It has to do the how the question of agriculture was solved, mainly. I could discuss this in our. And then what we have in the Greek case, we have chain migration, people moving with networks. So when they come to the cities, they are not atomized. In several neighborhoods in Athens, I can say that here we have people from Crete, here we have people from Epirus, here we have people from this place. I can go there and find people actually. So this is one. It is that society as such doesn't become modern. People keep the networks even in the cities. And think then if you are trying to implement bureaucratic organizations there, it gets some kind of network sabotage all the time, because people know each other quite much, and it's difficult to make it work.
Okay, I think we should stop because our time is over. St. Petersburg, see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation.
Thank you very much.